Welcome to the Rimworld patch rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see in version 1.6. A new DLC means that it's time for a new core version, with 1.6 bringing more visual and performance changes when compared to the stuff-based approach that 1.5 had. This means you won't be finding new buildables in your architect menu, but you will be noticing a lot of quality of life changes and better support for larger late game colonies. We're not going to be going over every little change in this video because some of them are so small that it's only going to impact a handful of people. If you'd like to read the patch notes for yourself to go over all the weird and wonderful details, there's a link in the video description. As well as a link to the patch notes, I have also included a link to a list that was made by Low Cheesecake on Reddit that shows the overlap between existing mods and the changes that are coming in with 1.6. It's great to help if you're preemptively pruning your list, and it should help stop some people hassling mod creators if their mods are no longer required in some cases. Anyway, let's start by looking at the planning overhaul. Planning now incorporates some parts of the more planning mod with a slightly different approach. Plans can now be placed with multiple colours and behave like zones rather than a tile marker. This means that you can select individual plans and change their colour, expand or shrink them, as well as hiding them if needed, or even copying the layout. This also means you'll be able to select an area with multiple plans and copy the entire thing over. It's useful if you're planning housing blocks or if you need to nudge your entire plan over slightly without deleting the whole thing and starting again. These plans can be rotated by pressing the Q or E keys, making it incredibly quick to throw down a basic framework for something like a mountain base. To go with drawing these plans out, you now also have a version of designator shapes included in base game. This doesn't have quite as many options as the mod, but it's extremely easy to use. When placing something like a wall or a zone, you can use Q and E to cycle between the potential shapes, with straight lines, angled lines, filled rectangles, filled ovals, and empty oval options. Just note that some of these shapes are only going to be accessible depending on what you're doing. For instance, the empty oval tool isn't really that useful with a harvest order because it's weird. Also, if you want to make sure that what you're building is perfectly square or circular, simply hold down Control and it'll make sure that the size is equal both vertically and horizontally. Finally, for this new tool, there's an option in the Control section of the menu that will remember the last draw style you used. This seems to remember independently from each type of order too. So if you set your walls to be a hollow square, it isn't going to try and apply that setting to a stockpile or a crop zone. Handy. Replace Stuff is another mod that's now semi-incorporated into base game too, as you're able to place blueprints over existing structures. This means you no longer need to tear down all of your roofing and wooden walls to build a room back out of stone. You can just have your builders handle it bit by bit. So far, this replace functionality works with walls, conduits, doors, sandbags, barriers, fences, chairs, and beds, meaning it's also easier to upgrade a single bedroom into a double bedroom without first having to remove a colonist's sleeping spot. There are multiple changes to the world map that incorporate parts from mods like regrowth and geological landforms, as well as a general overhaul to most of the core biomes that sees some of them become significantly easier to live in. Let's start with the new option of setting up camps. This is an option for your caravans that will allow you to spawn a temporary map and control your colonists directly when travelling, making it easier to do things like properly tend a wound, fix a drug dependency, or harvest materials directly from the area to make sure you have enough food to carry on. These camps don't last forever, or at least won't last forever without being hassled, as after 4 days, raids will begin attacking them. This new camp mechanic also replaces the default behaviour of losing a caravan due to all members having become incapacitated. So let's say that you've got one lone hussar travelling and they're deep into a go juice deficiency. Previously, when they hit 30 days, they'd have fallen unconscious and would have been lost forever. Now, when they collapse, they spawn a camp map and you're able to travel to it and rescue them, provided you can make it there quickly enough anyway. In terms of generation changes to the world that impact both the globe and individual map tiles, many elements like rivers, mountains, caves and coasts are now displayed as a map feature, ensuring that the location will generate with that feature present. If you hold down the Alt key whilst moving your mouse over the world map, you will see a very quick overview of what features are present on a tile without needing to select it individually. River tiles have been adjusted to make the direction on the world map more closely resemble with what they generate on the tile, as well as having wider banks when cutting through mountains so that colonists are able to more easily traverse them. Not only that, biomes like forests that have a river will have an abundance of fertile soil along the riverbank, making it incredibly easy to get a lot of raw food and materials grown in a rapid time. Rock clusters and mountains have had their generation adjusted to make for more natural and interesting shapes. Coasts have also had the same treatment and are now more visually appealing to settle on. For biomes that have a boggy or muddy soil type sometimes, there are plants that have more diverse growing conditions, so you should find that things like boreal forests or tundra maps do have a little bit more interesting vegetation now. If you're landing on a map with a cave that has insects living inside it, you're also going to find that these hives are now better supported and will always have glow pods around them. Finally, quest sites always have a minimum of 200 by 200 tiles when generated, which should help to mitigate strange generational issues if the map features a central lake or a river. You'll also notice on the map screen that you now have a button to quickly jump to different colonies, caravans, or quest locations. This definitely feels like something that's being added in preemptively for the new expansion to make it easier to track your colonists across an entire planet, as you're likely to be jumping around with a ship. This is also further enhanced by active maps on the world being highlighted with the green border, so it seems pretty safe to assume that we're going to be splitting our colony across multiple zones with the release of Odyssey. Let's talk about how flight is no longer something limited to transport pods or ships anymore. Birds can now actually take to the skies. You're going to find that base game has support for chickens, ducks and geese, with more animals likely on the way with the new DLC. The flying property allows the creatures to move faster and ignore any penalties applied by the terrain, as well as hop over obstacles like fences or ignore traps that have been placed on the ground. From testing so far, flying animals still can't actually pass over solid walls, so man-hunting ducks are not going to bypass your perimeter. These flying animals can, however, enter and leave the map anytime that they choose, without needing to run all the way to the border. That means that a couple of missed shots at geese when hunting might cause them to scatter. What other things have we got to go over? The search functionality has been improved. I'm sure there are still some people who aren't even aware this exists. Z is the hotkey which opens the search dialog, but there's also a quick button down in the right hand side of the UI. The search terms can now also include def names, thing labels and any renamed items, as well as looking in a colonist inventory as well as any containers that you have. This means it's easier to find things like a persona weapon or a book without needing to know the exact name. You can now also search the world map too, handy for things like quickly checking if there are any work sites or finding a faction base that's been mentioned in a quest. The water in-game has seen a visual overhaul. Not quite to the same level of shiny that some things Float had implemented, but it's still very pretty. It'll now also ripple when a colonist or animal traverses across it, with ducks, bears and the Devourer from Anomaly having unique appearances when in water. As to why it's only those three, I've got no idea. You've got a few UI improvements for policies and crafting builds. You can now set any policy as the new default and rename crafting builds to make it easier to arrange your workbenches. As for some more general quality of life fixes, you can now paint your bridges. There's a deconstruct conduit option in the Power Architect menu to make it easier to remove them when they're underneath walls or other structures. Special trees can be selected and now have a toggle that prevents or allows them to be designated for cutting when you drag an order over the area, so no more accidentally making the anima tree scream. You also now have a toggle for hackable items too, so that they will automatically be worked on if a colonist is available to do so. To go with these automatic gizmos, transport pods can now be set up to automatically rebuild on pod launchers too, as well as fuelable buildings like generators having an option to eject their fuel. Handy if you had a more pressing need for that chem fuel or if you ran out of wood for your other constructions. Lastly, with this bit of quality of life, you're also now finally able to dress another pawn, like a prisoner, which helps to greatly offset the mood debuffs for being naked or wearing tattered clothing. Even better is that you can preemptively dress a prisoner into slave gear to keep them suppressed right off the bat. Alright, let's cover the big thing. Performance improvements. 100% this feature had to be high on the list of priorities given what the next expansion is planning to implement mechanically. Colonies split over multiple maps will dramatically increase the processing load. So, how has in-game performance been improved? In a super broad sense, TPS, or ticks per second, has improved by 20 to 30% on a late game colony. If you're not sure how TPS actually works, it's basically what the game is aiming to achieve with its speed controls. Standard aims for 60. Faster is 180 and fastest is 360, with a mod like Smart Speed adding a fourth button that aims to hit around 900 TPS. If you're running a colony with, say, 40 pawns, increasing the game speed very often feels like it does absolutely nothing, because whilst it's aiming for 360 ticks a second, it can only actually achieve maybe 90 to 100. Basically, the game cannot be forced to run faster than it is capable of processing, with the longer a colony goes increasing the amount of processing that's going to need to be handled. So how has this improvement been achieved? Well, a lot of the performance mods we've seen on the workshop have been incorporated in some way into base game now. Pathfinding has been multi-threaded, lighting has been multi-threaded, pawns and things are ticking less often in the background, creating less demand on your hardware when it isn't needed. There are many optimizations around egg laying, foraging, alerts, ideology and royalty checks, how colonists haul and how pen food is calculated. It's a lot of small changes that add up to a very noticeable improvement, with one of the biggest changes being the launch time of the game. In my case, testing without any mods, just the core and the DLC, starting the game went from around 20 seconds to just 7 seconds. Given that when my mod list was at its most chonky, the game took over 15 minutes to start, it's likely that this improvement is going to have a significant impact on how fast you can get into the game and start actually playing. For some other improvements, one that I've been screaming for is the ability to force a caravan to just get the fuck out. Now you have that option. If it's looking like your base is about to be completely overrun and you would rather just leave and settle a new map than have to watch the colony perish, you can make a caravan and force them to depart immediately, having them head to the closest map edge and just getting away from the danger. Definitely something that'll be useful with the more dangerous maps that we're landing on in Odyssey. No more losing a run because people are packing a meal and milling about near the hitching spot. As a somewhat more general improvement, bugs have seen a lot of fixes for their AI, so you'll no longer be able to juggle native insect threats on your home tile by scaring them with gunfire, and they won't behave quite so erratically if they are downed from pain or temperature and then recover at a later date. It seems that raiders do still have a tendency to go for the hostile bugs on your map though. That behaviour hasn't been patched out. For a small but welcome change, you now get warnings on the health tab when you're installing a part into a colonist if that site overlaps with an existing prosthetic or enhancement. Another welcome change is that the unknown joiners you're occasionally offered from a certain quest are no longer such a mystery. Whilst you're not going to know everything about them, at least now they have the decency to tell you what skill they are most proficient in. There are a few other quick quality of life changes around odds and ends too. Sarcophagi are now prioritised over a grave when burying a colonist. Steam geysers are highlighted when placing a geothermal generator. When doors are built, colonists will actually move the item that may have been blocking the door to avoid it being left open. Colonists that are incapable of hauling will no longer drop a book whenever they've finished reading it, they return it to the bookshelf. There are now right-click commands to extinguish another colonist that's on fire. Items without a quality tag are no longer treated as being normal quality by the stockpile or apparel logic, meaning if you only want to wear excellent quality armour, you'll still be able to equip an insanity lance without having to force it. It's just a lot of nice, small fixes to remove a bit of base game aggro. Now we've got some balance changes. These are going to be super quick though. If you want to see the new values, they are shown on the screen when mentioned, and I'll be saying a very quick overview of what's changed rather than getting too nitty gritty about it. Mediocre bedrooms now have a better buff, whilst awful bedrooms are now less punishing. Certain production buildings will have a speed penalty if they are built in a room that isn't of the correct type, to discourage making one-room bases that have the best of everything for a minimal investment. There's also a few odd bits with this change though, like you're going to want to have your drug lab in your research room. Also, no more worries about how you set up your barracks in the early game now, as changing a single bed to medical is not going to turn your barracks into a hospital and cause worse mood debuffs. Plate armour now gains significantly more stats from the material that was used to make it. Flak pants and jackets are naturally more protective. Flak vests are now covering less body parts. Marine armour and cataphract armour, as well as the variants that they come with, have less of a penalty to move speed. The peeler is more accurate and much faster to throw. The revolver is more accurate. The LMG fires faster and hits harder. The sniper rifle fires much faster and is even more accurate. The minigun fires faster and has a better close accuracy. The charge rifle has slightly buffed damage and range, and the charge lance has better range too. Other balance changes that don't tie to gear or one type of room specifically are as follows. Sterile conditions now have a greater impact on surgery success. Construction failure always returns at least one of each material that was used. Repeatedly moving to a new map and resettling it is going to generate progressively less mineable resources and ancient dangers. This setting can be altered in the Storyteller if you would prefer to play a nomadic style without any penalty. Siege raids can now occur earlier. Shaman merchants will now buy animal parts from you. Enemy settlement defenders now attack in just 10 hours rather than waiting for 4 days. Workbenches that are placed outside now have an 80% speed penalty. Natural filth and debris, however, is less punishing for beauty. Ancient beds are far less comfortable. Suppression offset has been added to some helmets and armor types. Lynxes have had their trainability altered. Reading is now slowed in darkness, and horses consume more food. All in all, there's quite a lot of tweaks and changes, but there's nothing here that should flip your colony on its head. Then there's other tweaks that don't really fall into anything specifically. There's things like general pathfinding improvements at longer distances. Face masks and timber shrooms have now been included with the core game on the off chance that you don't own biotech or ideology. Deep drills will now reliably produce the same type of stone that they are placed on. There's more junk on the map that can be deconstructed rather than needing percussive maintenance. Fertilized eggs are now set to turn into unfertilized eggs when they are ruined by temperature, and animals are more likely to be fed kibble when downed, so colonists aren't wasting your expensive food on a sick doggo. In terms of DLC specific changes, pawn lending quests from royalty are now less demanding, and the shuttles sent by them to ferry your colonists actually come with a comfort value of 0.65 rather than 0. Ideology sees improvements to ancient complex generation to make things more interesting. You'll notice more traps, living areas, and actual workshops. There are a few tweaks to certain presets too, like small spaces don't care becoming indoors preferred. The menu selecting presets has also been improved to make it easier to navigate. Colonists' favourite colours have now also been labelled when hovering over them. Just remember that certain things like carpets and paints work on a different colour grouping, so their favourite colour to wear might not be available to build or use in their bedroom. Colonists can now also play the drums at any time for a little bit of music recreation. Biotech has a couple of new genes, with web phalanges and indoor dweller. As well as this, it's now also easier to see who's supposed to be teaching a lesson when selecting a child. You're also going to be guaranteed to get back your nanostructuring chip when deconstructing a waste pack atomizer. The highest tier for growth has been slightly tweaked and will sometimes offer you 4 passion choices. There's also a scroll bar added to the gene list for xenotype editing, and the gene extractor's insert person menu has been reorganised, and the market value of xenogerms has been reduced. Onto anomaly specific changes. Incinerator weapons are now always the same standard quality. Brain damage from chronophagy has been increased, undercave generation has been tweaked a little bit, the warning about needing holding platforms now doesn't appear immediately upon starting a colony, and turret packs now have a minimum crafting skill requirement, with Deadlife IEDs also having a smaller radius. One of the very small changes to mention that's been added in dev mode is an absolute godsend for people like me. You now have a tool to change the stuff of an item, which means you no longer need to spawn 20 simple helmets when only 4 colonists need them, because they keep being made out of something like gold or silver. And that's about it for the patch notes that are going to matter to most players. So let's talk about Odyssey for a bit. As we know with how Rimworld DLC launches, each week there's going to be a deeper dive released into some of the new mechanics that will be included. With 7 bullet points worth of features shown in the overview, it doesn't mean I expect it to be 7 weeks away, more so that it's only going to be the major features that get covered. It's unlikely we'll go into exact detail about each bit of new gear, for example. First things first, let's address the hype around Odyssey, quote unquote, including Save Our Ship 2, which is something I see frequently in my comments and on the subreddits. Obviously, we can't tell everything from just digging into the screenshots, but it's clear what parts included in these screenshots are new, with the ship overall being far less complicated than anything built in Save Our Ship 2. Why am I saying this? I think a reasonable amount of people might be raising their expectations a little bit too high about the mechanical complexity of these grav ships. The core game has always kept things relatively accessible, something that if you mess around with for long enough you will eventually figure out. So I think that Save Our Ship 2 still has its place when Odyssey launches, potentially building off the framework that the DLC includes to greatly flesh out the functionality of your ship. Again, take it all with a pinch of salt, it is speculation, but I can't imagine the systems will be anywhere near as heavy or detailed as SOS 2 currently offers. From that one very clear image of a grav ship in orbit, we can see engines, fuel tanks, the grav core, control console, something that looks like a shield structure. Given how low and high shields look on the mech raids, it has a striking resemblance, and there's two further structures that may be oxygen or temperature regulators, given the amount of vents that are used in the ship design. Now, what do I not see in this screenshot? Weaponry of any kind. There aren't any charge blasters or space torpedoes, there isn't any additional armor plating outside of the base game walls. There are angled walls, however, which is awesome to see, but there also don't appear to be any dedicated shield batteries or any way to shift the focus of the shield's location. All of that to say, I don't think we're going to be fighting other ships in this expansion, without the help of SOS 2 anyway. This looks to be designed entirely around exploration, so the shield might be necessary for withstanding orbital debris strikes, making it possible to explore a dense asteroid field without fear of being utterly crippled, or to allow you to get close enough to explore the ancient mechanoid wrecks, as you can withstand their defensive structures' salvos. A lot of what the grav ship does also seems to play in the reason that performance improvements were needed. We can see from the screenshots that it's floating in orbit above the planet, so there is a potential that you're splitting your colony in two. One ground team that maintains your primary base and one space team that's off exploring and improving the ship over time. I am curious to try and do a run that exists primarily in orbit, as I'm sure are many other people, as this expansion is definitely one of the most nomadic focused we've had so far. This DLC also opens up one of the least punishing ways of running with an away team as well, as the ship makes it fairly easy to quickly return to the base and assist with a raid defense when needed, something that is a lot harder to manage when your caravan relies on horse travel. Moving down from the grav ship screenshot, I'm not sure if we're being teased with new materials, given the blue and red hues to the wall, or if they just fancied using paint on their houses, as the material storage doesn't appear to be holding anything new, but we can definitely see the new fauna, biomes and the different kind of geysers. Now, here comes a pretty big claim that I think is going to go down about as well as a fart in a crowded elevator for many viewers. Given the language used when mentioning the word planet, I do not expect us to be able to leave the home world and generate an entirely new globe. You've got 5 new biomes, unique quest sites, asteroid fields, mechanoid space stations, but nowhere in that explanation does it mention travelling to a new planet. I believe the use of travelling beyond to mean space stations and the like. It's already very demanding on the engine to run multiple tiles at once. Simulating multiple worlds at the same time does not currently seem to be in the scope of this DLC. It might be the case that you need to start generating your worlds with 100% coverage if you plan on exploring for the long term. As to what's covered with Beyond the Atmosphere, we've been shown it. Wrecked orbital platforms, derelict satellites, ore-rich asteroids and mechanoid wrecks, all with the threat of space scavengers if you spend too long delving for these riches. We can see it in the screenshots again, it's ground-based combat. Sure, people are wearing spacesuits and presumably certain weapons will be more or less effective in the cold, harsh vacuum of space, but functionally, ranged and melee looks like it operates about the same. Onto the new wildlife, and this is white noise for me because I'm never a player that really cares about animals. There's new mythical beasts like the Alpha Thrumbo, there's more flying animals included, there's better development of the skill system for certain types of animals to grant them a unique ability to better help around the colony. All of that might make them more viable for me, but I don't know, they've always just been a pre-processed fine meal in my eyes. One of the things I'm surprised comes in as an expansion feature rather than a 1.6 inclusion is fishing. I'm honestly not expecting it to behave that differently from how fishing is currently implemented in Rimworld either. The new weapons sound like one of the more interesting parts, given that we've seen a unique gear approach with the rewards from the VE quest mods. This is set to give all kinds of weird and wonderful bonuses to weapons that will let you keep your A-team strapped with the best kind of nonsense the planet has to offer. I'm all for more unique bonuses or one-off items that make gearing your colonists more interesting, rather than the all too easy approach of get X weapon on everyone and pull trigger until job is done. It looks like you're going to need these weapons to handle the new threats too, including the Insect Queen, Wasp and Hunter drones, and a new mechanoid called the Cyclops. An interesting use of the pit feature from Anomaly seems to be on display for this Insect Queen too. As to whether we'll be diving into the heart of the insect nest itself remains to be seen. That just leaves the vague hint around the other potential ending for Rimworld with the machine hive mind. Personally, I can take or leave these kind of inclusions. It's normally something I'll do at least once just to check it out, but I rarely find myself organically leaning towards trying to hit an ending scenario with how I play. Although with the hinting around the ending, it comes across as another Anomaly-esque choice, destroy or use, meaning that hopefully whilst it might make the credits roll, it won't actually close the book on the colony that you're playing, allowing you to return to the world with your newfound power and carry on exploring whatever it may throw at you. So, am I hyped for Odyssey? Yeah, more so than I was for Anomaly, but I don't think anything has topped quite how excited I was around the release of Biotech. Do I see this expansion falling into the same problem that Anomaly has, in that if you don't go balls deep on the mechanics it's going to offer, you don't really get a lot back out of it. We've yet to see how accessible getting a functional grav ship is going to be, with most of the new content and features seemingly locked behind it. I'm almost certain it won't be as simple as it is with the monolith in Anomaly, which required poking with a stick. This means this could be another expansion that you do not interact with very deeply on every single colony. But by the same token, even a minor amount of interaction with Odyssey seems to be more beneficial than dipping your toe into Anomaly. Again, it's all theory crafting at the moment, but access to a small grav ship to help with a world quest, trade and travel, as well as obtaining materials from space, will make running your home colony significantly easier. Whereas you need to get pretty damn deep into Anomaly before the rewards start really becoming worthwhile. And getting deep into Anomaly meant for far more dangerous threats to both your colonist's physical and mental health. So, going out on a limb here, it feels like lessons were learned after the inclusion of ambient horror settings for Anomaly that have fed into the design around Odyssey. This doesn't come across like an expansion that will give a quest to every colony you play and crash land a partially built grav ship on your tile, regardless of how unfitting it is to what you're doing and how technologically advanced you may or may not be. It seems self-aware enough that this new content and the mechanics around it should be a conscious choice that the player makes to engage with, rather than something that's always thrust upon you. Either way, we'll get more hints as the weeks progress and the launch day nears close. Sorry this one took a little bit longer than I would have liked to get out. I came down with a wicked flu the day after the news broke, and I had to wait for my voice to be a little bit less Disco Elysium.
Although it was fun talking like this for a while, brother.
If you'd like to see the current suggestion list for mod rundowns, it's available to view on my Patreon page. All of my posts there are totally free to read and it's pinned at the very top. You can support me in producing content like this for just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits of these videos and it helps me to stay alive. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you would like to see a full breakdown for or suggestions of mods you would like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown.
Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.